was looking into some research by Stanley Milgram, a psychologist from Yale University, and some of the experiments and tests he did to understand the reason why people obey authoritative figures, the obedience to authority. And when you look at the basics of human behaviour, this explains in some ways why people obey narcissistic people, toxic people, and why people stay and why people believe. There's several tests that he ran. One of those tests was where he got one person causing pain to another person. And before he ran the experiment, he spoke to people, asking people what they would do. And the majority of people said they would stop. Once they realised someone was suffering, they would stop. They would stop at a certain point. They wouldn't take it any further, which is what the majority of people say when it comes to being in an abusive relationship. The majority of people say they would not put up with that. They would not deal with that. They would not end up in that situation. They would walk free from that situation. The vast majority of people claim there is no way they would ever end up in that situation. However, in one way or another, near enough all of us end up in that situation at one point or another throughout our lives without even knowing it, without even recognizing it. Another experiment was peer pressure and the fact that people are willing to go along with peer pressure than their own senses, their own eyes, their own hearing. From what they've heard and seen, people will go against their own beliefs based on the peer pressure of others. And narcissistic people can apply so much emotionally, manipulatively, emotional manipulation to pressure somebody into making a choice that isn't in that individual's best interest, but is in that narcissistic person's best interest. When they just turn around and ask you to do something that for whatever reason you can't do it and you say no, and instead of respecting your no, they turn around and say, after all I've done for you, to guilt trip you, to pressure you into changing your mind to serve them. Most people would not put up with that kind of relationship until they're in it, and then they obey it. They obey the person who is exploiting them through their emotions. Narcissistic parents do this. People who are non-narcissistic can use emotional manipulation without meaning any harm to another person. Therefore, we can all fall victim to this behaviour, and not necessarily by a narcissistic person. We can all find ourselves using this behaviour, and once aware, we can then make a choice not to. When you're in a relationship with a narcissist, due to the mind games they play, due to the love bombing and the devaluation and the gaslighting and the projection and the triangulation and the silent treatments and the disengagements and the replacements, it leads us to walking on eggshells around them out of anxiety and fear, that nervous tension. It almost becomes easier to protect ourselves by complying with their behaviour, complying with the narcissist orders, complying with the narcissist standards, than living with the consequences if we don't comply. And narcissists are very exploitative. So they always have a way about them to justify and rationalize their hurtful, toxic, abusive behavior away in a manner that gets us to doubt our perception, doubt what we saw, doubt what we heard, doubt how we felt. When they accuse us of being too sensitive, of being insecure, that peer pressure, one-to-one peer pressure from an authoritative person, a narcissistic person, telling us that we're the one with the trust issues, creates that doubt within us, creates that confusion and that anxiety within us. So it becomes easier to believe them than trust in our own judgment. People do not stay because they enjoy being in that situation. People stay out of fear and anxiety. People do not stay because they're gaining something from that situation. People stay because they don't recognise they're being abused. And more often than not, they don't recognise they are being abused because they are taught to be obedient in school. They are taught to be obedient throughout childhood. They are taught to be obedient in the workplace, in society. The way we drive down the road, we are taught, depending on which country you live in, which side of the road you are to drive on. Because if you were to drive on the other side of the road, it's going to cause absolute chaos and potential death. So we live by certain rules. No matter what we are doing within our lives, we have those rules that the majority of people will abide by. Narcissistic people try to break them at every opportunity because they believe they're entitled and don't believe that they should have to adhere to the rules that the majority of us are willing to do to get along and make the world an easier place to live, make it less painful, less suffering for others. Narcissistic people lack the empathy for the others, so they're not quite interested in what happens to other people, only if it negatively impacts themselves. People stay in a narcissistic relationship not particularly because they get along with the narcissist or they enjoy the company of the narcissist. People stay because of the inability to escape. They don't know how to leave. They don't know how to escape. They don't know whether they're going to be believed because they almost can't believe it themselves. They don't know it's abuse because they can't figure out what is happening to them. And we learn in early childhood that we can't always do what we want to do. We learn to obey the rules of the society that we grow up around. Narcissistic people learn how to emotionally manipulate, how to throw a tantrum, how to place fear into people in order to live life on their terms, in order to get their own way. And every time they don't get their own way, they learn a new method to get their own way. They're deceptive, they're exploitative, they hide things from people. And we all know that when we ignore the rules, it usually causes chaos, just like driving on the wrong side of the road. It's going to cause absolute chaos. Therefore, the majority of us will go along with what seemingly look like appropriate rules. We have that perception to understand why. Narcissistic people don't. They feel like their sense of entitlement is being questioned, which is why their lives are usually full of chaos, because they're ignoring the social norms that actually help in some way. And those that are becoming obedient to the narcissist can disassociate in some ways. The stress and the trauma can cause us to forget things. It can cause us to feel uncertain about things. And that's without the narcissist gaslighting, telling people that that didn't happen and they're imagining things. And when you're disassociating away from the experience you're living because you can't recognize what is happening to you, and then somebody is gaslighting you, you become more uncertain. When they're using things like sleep deprivation, you become more forgetful. And then when they say they will do something for you and then they forget to do it, you can almost understand why they forgot. After all, you're forgetful. Only when you forget, you find yourself groveling and apologising and making sure you go and grab it for them, go and do it for them. Yet when they forget, they turn around and blame you. Well, you forgot to remind me. I never said that. It's very, very confusing when you're living it. And as you take responsibility for your own behaviour, you question yourself. You question whether you're doing the right thing or not. Narcissistic people find it very easy to hurt others because they lack empathy, and they don't take responsibility for their behaviour. They blame and shame those around them, meaning they can manipulate people and hurt people and take advantage of people and exploit people and abuse people with greater ease. They can cheat on people with greater ease because they go and cheat on someone due to their requirement of excessive attention, and no matter how much attention you give them, it is never going to be enough for them. So they can go and cheat on someone and then they don't take responsibility for their behaviour. They'll blame you for them getting themselves pregnant by somebody else or them getting somebody else pregnant. They'll blame you for not giving them enough attention. They fail to take responsibility. They shift the blame onto others. As they don't take that responsibility, they don't feel like they've hurt another person. They don't feel like it's their problem. They don't feel like it's their issue, which is why they'll go and tell you to go and deal with it, because they lack the empathy to care. However, if the shoe's on the other foot, they expect those that have hurt them to take responsibility. They expect those that hurt them to make it up to them. They have those double standards. And the only thing that can get us out of this is the awareness. The ability to see what is happening, the ability to see what another person is doing, the ability to recognise how another person is behaving, the ability to recognise the patterns of behaviour, to observe them for who they are and not who they sell themselves to be, so that we can have our own perception, we can make our own judgment, which is often why one thing can happen and it can be something major or it can be something minor over a long period of time of minor things where something just clicks and we can't take anymore. We have to almost break the rules, break the obedience to the authoritative figure which we've been abiding by for a long time. So then it suddenly feels very harsh saying no to them, no longer putting up with them. And they will then come at you and accuse you of being the awkward one, the selfish one, the stubborn one, the bitter one, to try and get you to question yourself again, to pressure you into going back to living life on their terms. So the majority of people, given the choice, would not stay in a relationship like this. However, due to the very nature of a narcissistic person and the very nature of our society, to some extent, which is needed to a degree, we find ourselves in these situations that we never thought we would end up in. And plenty of people end up in these situations that they never thought they would end up in. If anyone has any thoughts on this video, please do add those into the comments. Thank you very much to all the returning subscribers and your continued support with the channel. It's greatly appreciated. If you are new to the channel, I'm Elizabeth Shaw. This channel is all about narcissistic behaviour to give you more understanding of the people you might be dealing with within your life, and to handle yourself around those people if you cannot go no contact, and different methods to find what works for you to help you understand and overcome narcissistic and emotional abuse. If you do find the information helpful on the channel, please do subscribe. If you are looking for further help and support in understanding and overcoming narcissistic and emotional abuse, I do have several online guides available, and those teachable links are in the video description. If you're looking for someone to speak to, I have partnered with BetterHelp, and their sponsored link is also in the video description. Go out there and create the day that you deserve, because you do deserve to have an amazing day. Bye.